victory and the agony of defeat.
Great ball around the corner, Penasini. He beats them all. Junior Polar out wide, bumped away from Trindle. Sharks coming through. None of them can hold this.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020, and joining me for another preview podcast as the Eels head into round 4 of the Flegg Cup and NRL is my good mate, Sixties. Big fella, we previewed the junior reps yesterday, and now it's time for the senior football. And it's a very, very big docket of Parramatta Eels footy as the Cup look to stay undefeated, the Flegg look to build, and the NRL look for their breakthrough win under coach Jason Ryles.
Yes, mate. And by the way, hopefully our viewers / listeners prefer it to be that we split up that preview. It was 7 grades was a lot to get through in one podcast, especially when we always have the NRL as the last game that we preview. And we thought it was good to dedicate a podcast to the junior reps and also to give a bit of time to some viewer questions that we've had about what's happening in pathways, that sort of thing. It's allowed us to give that interview with Steve Georgalis last week its own space. And if you haven't listened to that, please do, because he gives us not just an update on junior reps, but we talk a little bit about NRLW and also the Greek national team and their experiences over there in Vegas. So you can pop back, have a look at that particular podcast. But yes, even with the 4 junior rep previews that took place yesterday, it's still a big docket of games to go through today. And we do so, of course, with thanks to Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, and also to Paraleagues, the home of the Eels. And, without the support of sponsors and partners with the work that we do, it wouldn't be possible for us to produce that content. And just a reminder as well that if there's any businesses that are interested in partnering with the Cumberland Throw, or if any of our listeners want to support us as well, we do have sponsorships available, but we also have Patreon if people want to jump on and make a small donation to the content that we produce. It would be much appreciated. So, John, 3 big matches out at Brookvale this week, and the first of those is the Jersey Flegg. And can I throw to you to take over the team list?
I was going to be a little bit cheeky too, because before we get to the 3 previews, as is our classic tip sheet history, between recording our news podcast on Tuesday and getting to the preview podcast, in fact, the very next morning of recording the preview podcast, the Eels decided to announce a couple of signings. So,
yes, we should get into that. And also I want to touch on what's happening at Parramatta.
And and there is a big story developing out of Parramatta in regards to the Sydney Shield and Ron Massey Cup, I believe. So
yes.
We'll get to that. Or do you want to start there with the unfortunate news, and we'll head into the happier news after?
Okay, yeah, we'll start with what's happening at Parramatta, and that's really a story that's still unfolding at the moment. But of course, the big outcome out of that is that the Parramatta club have made the decision to withdraw their team from both the Sydney Shield competition and also the Ron Massey Cup. The ins and outs of it, there's different versions of it going around, so we're not going to dive too much into it, but it basically goes around them coming to the realization that they don't have the funding for those teams to participate. Now, at the moment, there is a petition that's being circulated at the moment for people to sign that. I think there might also be a GoFundMe that they're trying to get started to be able to help keep those teams participating in that competition. Now, it does impact the Eels a little bit because the players in the Jersey Flegg squad that weren't selected on a weekly basis were placed in the Parramatta Sydney Shield team. So you could normally look at that Sydney Shield team and see Eels players who might have been playing Jersey Flegg over previous weeks. It's not a matter of them being cut by the club. It's just they're looking for games to play. So the Eels had a relationship with being able to drop players there, much the same as what happens in New South Wales Cup, where players who who are no longer able to play Jersey Flegg because of age and are part of the extended Eels roster will find themselves playing Ron Massey Cup for Wentworthville. So what I would imagine would happen with those players that are no longer able to play Sydney Shield for Parramatta is they might find themselves either at Baulkham Hills or at Wenty in the Sydney Shield competition. So and given that they're age footballers, I think that's why the decision was made to play them in Sydney Shield rather than Ron Massey Cup. So we wait to get further news on that. It is a story that has hit the mainstream media, so it's not just something that's floating around in just rugby league circles. So we'll see what transpires there, but not an ideal situation. Certainly not for a famous old club like Parramatta. Yeah. One of the biggest clubs in the Parramatta Junior Rugby League, but also a large club in their own right with lots of juniors that play there. And this doesn't impact the juniors. It's not a question of that. What people have to understand is that to fund teams in competitions like Sydney Shield or Ron Massey Cup, you're talking about semi-professional players that sign contracts to play for those clubs. They're not necessarily filled with just local players who have come through their pathways there. So it's not a question of not funding juniors anymore or not having the model for that. It's not having the funding to field senior clubs, and we have seen that in the past with clubs that participate in Ron Massey Cup and Sydney Shield. That there can be different teams every year because a particular club might find it difficult to raise the funds to be able to enter a team in any particular year. People will see a new team come in, another team drop out. I guess that's a matter for the New South Wales Rugby League now to look at, because it would be good for those competitions to be stabilised as much as possible. And I guess, to an extent they are, but, I guess it's a matter of looking at funding models and things like that. But we don't have the expertise to get into that in our podcast here, but we just thought we'd share that with you. So, John, now the big signing news for the Eels, because there's is both NRL and NRLW.
Yeah, it was a double whammy on, I believe, Wednesday, where the Eels announced another acquisition for the NRLW in Fleur, Ginn, who has joined the Parramatta Eels for seasons 25 and 26. She comes to us by way of a rugby union background, having spent a lot of time in the Queensland Reds Academy in the Australian A Rugby 7 system, where she had a lot of success. She's won a gold medal at the 2023, was it the international, whereas the Global Sevens tournament was the actual title there. But she's been a prominent member of the Seven Circuit there, and is currently playing union, I believe, just finishing up now, and will join the Eels obviously for their pre-season and bolsters their backline depth. Another speedy back will never go astray 60s, and that rugby sevens background has worked out well for the Eels in the past. Someone like Semi Radradra, and then obviously Rory Owens comes from a rugby union background too, and she was fantastic last year. So another what looks to be a pretty sharp pickup for the Parramatta Eels. Really keen to see how Fleur goes, and she's also just a young talent that's really coming into her own. So great pickup there, and it was actually originally part of our podcast with Steve Georgialis. So good to have it out in the public now, and we can share it with everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, the NRL signing.
And then, sort of came out of nowhere. But the Eels, with the nice bit of cap space they have available right now in season 2025, have made a move. And they've gone and got Dylan Walker to join them for seasons 25 and 26. So essentially a 2-year contract, given that we're only 4 rounds in to 2025 season 60s. And, sorry about that. Someone's unhappy outside. A bit of a beep. But yeah, Dylan Walker, not Dylan Brown, Dylan Walker comes to the Eels from the New Zealand Warriors. I believe he was released on compassionate ground 60s. And if you've watched any of Walker in the last few years, from his time at Manly and now the Warriors, he's transitioned into a pretty handy either 13 or super utility 14. And he lets you play that up-tempo, ball-playing lock forward through the middle, gives you cover in the halves off the bench, gives you cover in the centres off the bench, and even a bit of dummy half too. So we've spoken about that sort of super utility role on the bench, and he is quite literally the perfect player for that role. I am interested to see what Jason Ryles, or how Jason Ryles chooses to use him 60s, and what that means for Lussick, Smith, and Hands as the offset player there. Are we going to go with one primary dummy half moving forwards? Are we still going to go for rotational set of dummy halves and Dylan Walker, and then just take 2 forwards on the bench? It really can, or really could shake up the composition of not just the bench, but the starting team too. So good pickup. Gives the Eels a really great Swiss Army knife tool to use as a 13 or on the bench as a 14. I suppose 14 being the Nebulous term. You can obviously wear any jersey on the bench, but certainly on the field, no complaints there, and hopefully he can be a big contributor from the Eels starting next week, because I don't believe he's going to be parachuted into the team this week, because he was not part of Team West Tuesday.
Yeah, and I'm not sure when he is technically eligible to start playing, whether it's next week or whether it's the week after. So we'll have to chase that one up. John, I think you preempted what I was going to say, because you rattled off a string of questions. And I think that's where that's the first response really for a lot of Eels supporters, is a whole string of questions. What does this mean for the team? And conversely, what I'm hoping is that it actually provides an answer for Jason Ryles. So rather than a whole lot of questions to be answered, one big answer. Now that answer, whether it's to what to do with Dylan Brown being out of form, because Dylan Walker could easily slot into being, the straight out 5'8". It could be, and that could be the immediate future. It could be what they do sort of longer term when Dylan Brown departs. Does Dylan Walker become the 5'8" and revert to a specialist role? And of course, the other question is, the other answer is, does that solve, as you suggested, that super utility role of having someone on the bench who can cover a range of positions from forwards through to backline positions? Because there are have been many times in the past where you get an injury to a backline player, and then there's this massive reshuffle that goes on, and you end up with forwards playing out in the backs, and it becomes problematic unless you are a club that decides to carry a back on the bench. With someone like Dylan Walker, you're covering a range of positions, and if there's any reshuffle that has to be done, maybe it's a minor one.
Yeah, it facilitates a much smoother emergency transition during a game.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Look, you always look to what the departed team and their response is when you sign a player like this, and overwhelmingly what I've seen from Warriors fans is they're upset to lose him in terms of the on-field talent, and that's always a good sign. He's really carved out a niche as a up-tempo, back rower for them that can cover multiple positions. Like you said, it does give. I think his days as a specialist half. Well, he was never really a specialist half to begin with. Obviously, he was more of a centre that could be a bit of a running ball playing 5'8" option. But his days as a primary or frontline playmaker probably are behind him in terms of his best days. But he does give you an option there that has experience, and that's a big one. So I think he probably plays as a specialist 14 or maybe even starting 13 for us, depending on form and how Ryles wants to shake up that forward pack. But I do look forward to the impact that he can bring to the Eels, because there's no doubt that it gives the coach a degree of flexibility in his team selections that he does not have right now, being able to just have someone parked in the 13 or the 14 that covers pretty much everything you need to in the context of a bad luck in your game. So big acquisition there. And hopefully, like I said, he's available starting next week and can be an immediate impact player for the Parramatta Eels.
Yeah, and of course, there may well...
By the signing announcement does say he'll be available for selection next week.
Oh, he will be.
Yeah,
okay.
Against the Dragons.
Okay. So that's fantastic. That does answer that question. And I believe he wasn't at training that I saw yesterday, so I'm assuming that he starts training with the club next week. So
might be in the box or in the player section at the game this week as well, I suppose.
Yeah, so I don't know whether he's come in to meet the rest of the team as yet. That will be, of course, that'll be interesting as well. But as you say, when you see comments that have come in from Warriors supporters who are disappointed to have lost him, that is a really good indicator of the value that you might have added to the roster.
230 NRL caps too, plus a ton of rep games between New South Wales, Australia, and the Maori All-Stars. So brings a lot of experience, 60s.
It feels like he's been around forever.
It does. I mean, you remember from his days as a centre with South Sydney, and obviously was it Aaron Gray, and the fallout there, and then sort of becoming not a journeyman, but like going from a star centre to that back row utility role, and he's really carved out a new niche for himself. And it's always sort of tip your hat to players that can find ways to stay in the game and be equally effective in new roles.
Yeah, and look, I think, as I said, for me, if he provides answers for Jason Ryles, and you said before, maybe that Days have been a specialist in the halves, a role that he didn't really have for that long. But if he's even if that's behind him, I ask one question of you, John, which is, and people, our listeners know what massive supporters and fans of Dylan Brown that the Cumberland Throw is, because we've been covering him since he was first playing Harold Matts for the Eels. But I'm sure Dylan would be the first to admit that his form has, it has been the worst of his career right now. And so the question I'd throw to you, John, is current day Dylan Walker right now, based on Dylan Brown's current form, a better option at 5'8" for the Eels than Dylan Brown? Now, if the answer to that is yes, then I would suggest to you that Dylan Brown has a couple of weeks to find his better form.
Exactly. Just get the head in the right place and get back to his, it doesn't have to be his best form, but just good form.
Yeah.
Ideally, it's his best form, obviously, but he needs to, just zero himself and recenter.
Yeah, because if the Eels select Dylan Walker in first grade in his first week of availability, it would obviously be on the interchange. He's got a lot to learn in terms of the Eels systems. It would be far too much to ask him to step into an 80-minute role in the very first game, especially when he comes off the interchange for his current club. So that's why I say I don't think he becomes a genuine option for a few weeks yet for Dylan Brown, but maybe it's something not too far down the track where he becomes a genuine option for Jason Ryles.
Yep, exactly, mate. And we'll get a good look at him next week against the Dragons, and we can start having all those interesting sort of tangential discussions about where his best position is and who should he be replacing from there. But for now,
John, this has felt like a news episode.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when the Eels choose to drop like a big bomb on us after we finish recording our news podcast, there's not much we can do. And
it's crazy because the moment that it dropped, I got flooded with messages the TCT curse strikes again.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
or
It's so true.
here we go.
So true.
The news podcast has come out, and the news drops immediately. And through the preseason, we were doing our news podcast on all different days, and it didn't matter what the day was. It would seem that the news would drop the day after we would record the news podcast. You almost suspected that someone at the Eels is waiting for our news podcast to drop and then go, aha, we'll show them.
But yes, we do manage to get a reaction to it finally, and we can now move on to previewing what is, like you said before, a very busy slate of games for the Parramatta Eels on Sunday. It's a triple header out at 4 Pines Park, big fella, so let's get right into it. Kicking off in the Jersey Flegg, who come into this game on the back of a very good win against the Canterbury Bulldogs, where they showed a lot of defensive grit. And the team, I believe, it's mostly unchanged. We have a couple of players moving around, but at fullback, Arpa Twiddle, or Don the One. You got Tavaka Palu named on the wing this week, 60s, alongside Bradley Avery, with Antioch Faitala Mariner and Araz Namva in the centres. Worth considering that Palu and Namva are strong candidates to swap positions, because that's what they did last week, and Namva turning out at left wing and Palu at left centre. But Faitala Mariner and Namva on the right have been very good. It takes us to the halves. We saw Cooper Fuller on debut last week. He was solid. He partners Matthew Hunter, who will steer the team around the park with the number 7 on his back. Damascus Nemia, Jack Hudson and Tiankan Brown will be among the best front row trios in the competition in the early season, mate. They've hit the ground in red-hot form sprinting, not just running, but sprinting. And then in the back row, Tyrese Lekenny moves back onto the edge, and he'll be on the right with Domenico Destratus on the left. And the reason that Tyrese moves from lock to edge is because Saxon Pryke is back in Flegg this week after playing a great game in New South Wales Cup last round. That takes us to the interchange bench, where Paddy Spence, Jalen Taewa, Raf Destratus and Yeti Samuelu are your 4-man rotation. Jonah Sullivan and Muhammad Alamuddin in the extended roster, as we called out in the news podcast. Great to see Maui back in the fold, 60s. He was obviously very good for the Eels across the last few years in the pathways and then into Jersey Flegg. But he finds himself on the outside looking in because of that backline form, and he'll get his opportunity at some point. But with Palu, Faitala Mariner, Namva and Avery doing such a good job, right now he is just a 20th man, or technically the 19th man, but with the 20 jersey.
John, I think you just provided an answer about the Eels just then in your statement when you spoke about the backline form of the Eels and a player trying to force their way in. When you looked at this Eels side and what the pack was likely to be before the season started, you immediately said, well, there's strength in the forwards. And that'll be how they'll approach their season is through the platform that they'll be able to lay, and that's not necessarily changing. But what you're saying is this backline form has a lot to do with the wins that they've already registered this season.
Yeah, edge defense has been really good last week, and then against the Tigers, it was good for most of the game, right until the last 10 minutes. So great platform there. Bradley Avery, who I believe we got from the Melbourne Storm, so maybe a Jason Ryles connect there, has been really good in the right wing. He's fiery. I like it. Defensively, loves a tussle. He was going up against Geordie Mazzoni, who I believe is the younger brother of another Mazzoni in the Canterbury Pathways, and they're both talented wingers. And that was a really good skirmish down the Parramatta's right sideline, Canterbury's left. And he's been really good rucking the ball out too. Faitala Mariner and Namva are obviously tenured players in the Flegg. They were there last year and are a real core part of the back line. So seeing all of these guys just put their hand up and say, I want to help out on both sides of the ball. Like we said, on paper, that forward pack sort of spoke for itself coming into this season. But the fact that the back line are standing up and being counted has been a big part of why they're 2-1 the start of the season, and could have been 3-0 if it weren't for that late game tilt against the Tigers.
And that really comes down to errors, doesn't it? The late game tilt.
Yeah.
So, as we often speak about with the age football in the pathways, and I mean, it really doesn't change when you get to NRL level either, because, a team can make the job so hard for themselves if the completion rates just aren't there. But if you've got that base of a decent level of completions, and by that we're talking about anything probably from 75% and higher.
I take 70% in Flegg and SG Ball and Harold Matts and the female equivalents.
I'd like to hold them to
I know,
standard.
but based on what we're seeing, if you get 70% completion rates, you are in the box seat to win a game. And in this case here, 60s. One thing I do want to mention in the context of this game is that you look at this team, and it's we speak about the importance of that combined arms approach between internal development and being a development club and player recruitment. And in a way, this Flegg team really encapsulates it, because you've got guys like Arpa Twiddle. Faitala Mariner isn't a pathways player, but we did get him early in the Flegg cycle. Araz Nava's pathways. Matty Hunter we picked up early in the Flegg cycle as well. And you've got players like Tiankan Brown, Dom Destratus, Tyrese Lakini, Saxon Pryke, Paddy Spence, Raf Destratus. They're all, Parramatta pathways players, and they've been complemented by pickups like Damascus Nemia, players like we mentioned Bradley Avery just then.
Actually, did we get a Raz from the St. George?
Yes, in the pathways, I believe, though. It was it becomes that grey area in the modern game where it's not a full-blooded junior, like talking about Harold Matts, but it's early enough in the process that teams will claim him as a junior. But
like Penrith.
But yes, or the Roosters. And then, but you got players, as we mentioned just then, Jack Hudson, Ieti Samuelu, Bradley Avery, and Jack Hudson. They've all been great pickups just to augment this team and help it find another gear. And that's, I think, schematically and as a blueprint, what you want to see the club doing from the Flegg upwards, really. And, you augment internal development with smart signings. And that's been the case for the Flegg. And they come into this game against Manly, who, if I just pull up the table, where is the Flegg there? Manly are on the same amount of wins as the Eels. They're 2-1, a little bit behind on for and against, but that doesn't mean too much this early in the season. And right now, the Eels are the best of the defeated teams. Panthers, Raiders, Storm 3-0 in the season, and the Eels hot in their heels with just the one loss against the Tigers. So this is going to be a great contest. Two evenly placed teams early in the season. And at 4 Pines Park, Manly maybe with their noses in front with the home field advantage 60s. But the way our boys are playing, I'd back them to get the job done.
Yeah, from memory, I think our record in recent seasons has been pretty good against Manly, although I think there was...
Let me go to the games.
I remember it was last year or the year before where they let I think Manly went on a rampage in one round and put a bit of a score on them. But I'm pretty sure that last year they won at 4 Pines Park.
They split results against the Seagulls last year. Was this game at 4 Pines? Yes, you're right. So both teams traded away wins. And then historically, in this iteration of the Jersey Flegg, the Eels are ahead 6-4 with 10 games played. Of course, the junior history goes well past past that, going backwards. But reminder that the Flegg did cease to exist for a little bit. So at least it's under 21s.
Yes. Taking the place of the NYC.
Correct.
When the NYC
under 20s.
folded. First of all, an under 20s, and then with COVID, they bumped all the years up by 1 year.
And they also didn't play football in general there, so they didn't get those games recorded.
Yep. So, John, like you, I'm gonna tip the Eels to get this win, and obviously that's without seeing enough of Manly as well in this grade. But I've got a lot of faith in not just the players that are in this Eels team, but the football that Jordan Rankin had the team playing at the back end of last year, and that there would be a combination of his takes on coaching, plus also the systems that Ryles wants to introduce to the lower grades. So I think, Jordan Rankin's got a good career in front of him as a coach. One of the games last year, they had to play the game on the top field at the Kellyville complex.
Yeah.
And there was no dressing shed.
It is incredibly
sit in.
intimate as a fan. Like you said, you get access to the team's strategy meetings
The
and
halftime
revs.
meeting.
Yep,
All
exactly.
the instructions was there as they sat at chairs, basically beside the crowd that was there watching the game, and it was a terrific insight into the type, not just the type of instructions and communication from the coach, but also the players within the group that are the talkers, the ones that have something to say about what's happening in a game. So anyway, tipping the Eels. John, you doing the same?
Yeah, I think go for the Eels here, mate. And like I said, Manly at home, so they do have an advantage there. But based on what I saw last week, 60s, that was perhaps the single most impressive Flegg defensive effort I've ever seen. And we've watched a lot of Flegg, and we've seen some good efforts, and we've seen some pretty ordinary efforts, to be fair. But for the amount of football that the Eels turned over, their resilience on the goal line was nothing short of incredible. So hopefully that can be a real plant the flag and banner moment for this team and catapult them into a really strong early series run, or early season run, as opposed to what we saw last. I mean, they're already miles ahead of last year, aren't they, 60s, where we saw them go 0-7. Being 2-1, and knowing how solid this team is playing and knowing what is in the wings coming from the SG Ball this year, I am very excited to see how this Flegg team progresses across the course of a season. And tough trip to Manly, but I'll tip him to win a tough one.
Yep. And now that takes us to the second of the three games at 4 Pines Park, which is the New South Wales Cup game, and the Eels taking on a Manly team that is now branded as Manly and not Blacktown.
Yeah, not the Blacktown Workers Eagles. Yeah, big change there to the branding as the Seagulls look to, like the Parramatta Eels, sort of reforge your own identity in reserve grade. We saw that with the Eels and Wenty a few years back, and it comes down to being aspirational the first grade, doesn't it, 60s, and just having more connection to the eventual badge you're going to be playing for. So certainly can't.
Oh, you know how I felt about that. I could never understand a first grade squad training all week in the colours, the gear,
and then putting on a different kit,
putting on a different jersey on the weekend.
And that's never a knock to Wenty or Blacktown, but more coming from the lens of the NRL. And so as much as we do like to put the boot into our sister club, even though they've had plenty of success, this is a very prudent decision. And the Eels come into this one on the back of, well, it wasn't perfect 60s, but it was a solid win against the Bulldogs. Last 20 minutes, they came storming home before Ronnie Volkman iced it with a great field goal to make it 23-16, I believe, in the round 3 of the Cup to keep the Eels 2-0 on the season and undefeated. And
they barely touched the ball in that last.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, Canterbury had all the, it was just a case of all the ball, the whistle started going their way. There was a lot of penalties.
Yep.
And, when you get that momentum, suddenly you're finding, extra 15, 20 metres a set, and you can go from your red zone to an attacking kick very easily. But the Eels held on. That's the big thing. And they go to this one. It's a 1:25 p.m. kickoff out at 4 Pines Park. 1:40. So it's Eels say 1:45 in their type statement. The game centre. Sorry, my dog has just come back. The game centre says 1:25. So budget for that 20 minute variance there, guys. I'm not sure what the exact time is, but Eels look like.
If you have a look at the earlier game, that probably gives you.
Yeah, let me just go back to that one.
Bit of an idea.
Control Shift T. 11:40 a.m. So it looks like they brought the games 20 minutes forward. 60s.
Yes.
That was a 12 o'clock kickoff initially. So they obviously want a bit more buffer to first grade. It looks like, just to allow for the teens on the field. Maybe, I don't know. But we look at this one.
League match coverage too.
Yeah, also the Channel 9 and Channel Fox Sports coverage. But Eels, a couple of changes this week. 60s. I think it's by and large positive. We've got players coming back from suspension, players coming back from 1 week layoffs due to injury, and we've got some young players back in this team as Jason Ryles shakes up the NRL. Starting at fullback, Joash Papali has started this season on fire, probably the pick of the Eels in what's been a pretty solid team, and he starts in the number 1 here. Hayes Dunster and Bowie Simonson on the wings. Bowie started last week at right centre, played 40 minutes, and now shifts out to the wing in what is probably a telegraphed move for a potential NRL return shortly thereafter, although that's going to be pending the form of everyone involved, obviously. In the centres, Jake Tungwell is back after getting a nasty, I can't even call it a stinger on the shoulder 60s because it looked way worse than that. But he had
it seemed way worse when I spoke to him. However, he is training. He is going to play. And I would say he's made a very, very good recovery because,
knowing what NRL players and reserve graders that are in the NRL frame put their bodies through, I would say he's nowhere near 100%. But that's the nature of the job, isn't it? You're still banged up, you're still dinged up. You got to get out there and play, and he's obviously trying to help the team. So well done to Jake. And then coming back to the reserve grade this week is Jordan Samrani, who will start in the centres. And Jordan obviously having a couple of good stints in the NRL. But we believe this is a case of top 30 in development eligibility forcing Parramatta's hands. They probably got an extra week out of the dispensation that more than we thought they would. And now Jordan comes back down the reserve grade to either wait for a contract change or for round 10 to come by, or enough injuries and suspensions to put him back in the mix on dispensation. And look, this is...
we saw the value of having those spots available, picking up Dylan
Walker.
So.
Exactly. So you don't just fill him up willy-nilly, and that's why. And this is not a bad thing for Jordan 60s. He got a great taste of first grade against a couple of really good teams, and will now go back and just continue to plug away and hopefully get back in the first grade at some point this season. In the halves, Josh Lynn continues to stay in reserve grade, and he's done a great job, and he'll partner Ronald Volkman, who is the number 7. Front row sees Wittera McGregor back from suspension in the number 8. He partners Sam Tuivasa in the starting front row. Sam dropped back to reserve grade this week, 60s. Probably a case of rookie management more than anything else, and a chance for him to get some extended minutes against the Manly Seagulls. Brendan Hands will play 80 minutes at dummy half with no dummy half utility picked on the bench. And in the back row, you got Kelma Tuolangi, Bryce Cartwright back from 1 week layoff with injury, and Charlie Geimer at lock forward. The interchange sees Arthur Miller-Stevens, the man to drop out of that starting backline but then hold a place as the backline utility on the bench. Tony Mattielli and Brock Parker started last week. They dropped back to the bench to make way for Witteramu and Sam. And then Ryan Madison, the final man on the bench, a very experienced man they have on the bench in reserve grade. He's got the number 17. Saxon Pryke and Manny Luke are your 18 and 19, although looking at that, I would suggest that Manny Luke would be the 18th man for this game 60s, given that Saxon has been named to start in the Jersey Flegg.
You know what? I find it hard to believe that they can't find a spot. Excuse me. Can't find a spot for. We are recording early morning, so just so people are aware, the throat's not exactly happening at the moment. First thing in the morning, Saxon had one of his best games at New South Wales Cup level. It wouldn't surprise me if they find a way to include him in some way in this game. But then again, as you say, he's one of the few that is age eligible to drop back to Jersey Flegg so they can fit players in. And you look at that team and you go, once again, that pack has a lot of first grade experience behind it. And even then, when you look at the back line and go, well, both Hayes and Bailey have got that NRL experience. Jake Tungle got a little bit last year. Ronnie Volkman, a little bit of a background. Then, as you say, you go to the bench and there's Ryan Madison at number 17 with all of his experience plus a NRL premiership under his belt. And, I just look at that and I go, well, two things are possible with Ryan Madison here. Either he's carrying the injury and, he's coming back from injury and he'll play limited minutes off the bench, or they make a late change to it. There's a lot of speculation that's going on out there in social media land about, is there some sort of message that's being sent to Ryan Madison or what have you? The job of the coaches is to get the best possible outcome from the players that they have available to them. And Ryan Madison at his best, just like Dylan Brown at his best, makes a difference to the teams. He'd make a difference at his best at NRL level. and you'd have to go, he well and truly makes a difference at his best at New South Wales Cup level. So I have to lean towards it's a way of them getting his minutes back into him where he hasn't been playing and needs and is being eased back into game time. I don't believe you would get the best out of a player by going, you know what, I'm sick of you. You go to the bench in New South Wales Cup. I don't believe that would be the case at all. So, John, there's been a lot to like about the fact that they've been able to start. The first game was a bye, but then 2 back-to-back wins. Even if they're not playing their best football, they are doing what needs to be done at this level, which is they find a way to win, and also we're seeing some form from players who are putting their hand up for consideration. Joe Ash has been one of those players. Hayes Dunster has been one of those players. And given what's transpired in first grade, it's good to have those players there putting their hands up and saying, look, when the time comes or if the time comes, I'll be ready. And that's really the job of players in New South Wales Cup, to be ready for when they're called upon. So I think they get this job done. How's Manly travelling in New South Wales Cup, John?
Manly, where's my ladder gone? Coming to this game with 1 win and 2 losses under their belt, negative 11-point differential. So they haven't been hammered in those 2 losses relatively. So probably going to be a good contest again. Again, it's early season, so there's a lot of variables still in play in terms of overall form. But the Eels...
One of the things about Manly, John, traditionally in New South Wales Cup is that they've had players who can do a job when they've been called up into the first grade team, but they've been wildly inconsistent, if not a low-performing team in New South Wales.
They certainly haven't been among the heavyweights in the competition, I agree.
No.
We've seen in recent years, Newtown or Cronulla are always strong in this grade. We've seen Penrith be great in this grade. We've seen teams like, I suppose, the Warriors and the Bulldogs be pretty competitive in recent years. But among all the rising and falling among, the teams, and the Eels have been good to, sort of mediocre in reserve grade based on some struggles in the NRL. But Manly have never really been a threat. So it'd be interesting to see how they handle this one.
Yeah. So you're on board with the Eels win in this? I think.
Yeah, look.
You look at the 2 teams and it's a...
I feel like we're almost obligated to tip wins in the Flegg Cup just because it's going to be tough to get a win in the NRL this week. And
you're not tipping a win in the NRL? You let that...
I'm still thinking about it. I'm in a state of flux because Manly welcome back a superstar, obviously, but they are offset by the destabilising influence of their star halfback deciding he's going to pack up his bags and leave. So we'll get to that shortly. But I do think that on paper the Eels look really good. I think that on field, what we've seen against, they played, was it Western Suburbs in round 1? Was that right, 60s? Yeah, it was. Western Suburbs, right? And
you round 2.
Round 1 for them, but round 2, yes, they played the Magpies, and then they played the Bulldogs last week. And coming out of those 2 games with 2 wins shouldn't be overlooked. I think the Bulldogs are going to be among the better teams this year, and the Magpies have a lot of that the core of that SG ball team they had a few years back that are sort of starting to feel towards first grade. The rest of them are in Reggie's right now, so it's not a bad team. And I do think the Eels can get this one done, and I think that Nathan Cowles is doing a pretty handy job to start this year. So well done to all involved there, and hopefully they can get the win this week, 60s.
Yeah, absolutely. Which now brings us to the main event.
Yeah, round 4 in the NRL. The Eels playing the Manly Warringah Seagulls in what is Joe Ofahengahi's 200th game. And we've got a Manly lineup that looks like this. They welcome back Tom Tebojevic in the number 1, that superstar that I hinted at coming back. Jason Saab and Lehigh Hopewadi are on the flanks of Tolotau Kula and Ruben Garrick rounding out what is an excellent backline. Luke Brooks and Dowie Cherry Evans are in the halves. Josh Aloi starts in the front row this week for Taniela Paseka, who did his Achilles, the poor man. My condolences go out to him. And he'll partner CSI Takiaho in the front row with Jazz Tavanga, the starting dummy half. Hamali Olakawatu will run the right edge, I believe, and Ben Tebojevic will be on the left. Jake Tebojevic rounds out their pack and is their most experienced forward by some margin in the 13. On the interchange, they got Jake Simpkin to be their dummy half utility, Corey Waddell, Ethan Bullymore, and Nathan Brown, who comes back into this game fittingly against the Parramatta Eels, rounds out their four-man battery. Clayton Falalo, Jake Arthur, Toff Sipley, Raymond Tuamayala Vaega, and Dean Madison round out their extended bench. And then worth mentioning before we go to the Eels, that Todd Smith has the whistle and Ashley Klein is in the box.
Okay. That's you're a fan of the referee, aren't you?
I liked Todd Smith when he came in the first grade. I felt like he called the game more how it was rather than how they're sort of mandated with their indicators and whatnot. I'm not sure if it's still true. I haven't seen much of him this year. So, but he has been a tough marker against us, it feels like at times. So
yeah, but I was going to say, after the initial praise that came from both of us on his early games, I think there might have been a game or two where we took a step back in being so effusive in our praise. So, okay, into the Eels lineup in comparison, and that is and by the way, that is like the pace in that Manly backline is something else. And I was looking at that and going, okay, so the pack's a little bit more workmanlike, and then I read Hamali Olakwatu.
Yeah, and even though he's one man, he makes such a big difference. Yeah, he's dynamic. But the Eels, they look like this coming off what was frankly, I suppose, a heartbreaker against Canterbury, which, as we spoke about, is in a way nice to be reminded that we have a heart. So if Eels looking to make it the breakthrough win against Manly on the back of that effort, and they look like this. No surprises, Isaiah Yongi holding his place at fullback. Sean Russell comes back into the team to replace Jordan Samrani on the right wing, and he'll work with Zach Lomax down that edge. Will Penasini and Josh Adokar will run the left edge for the Parramatta Eels. Dylan Brown and Dean Hawkins get their second game together as a halves pairing. Obviously, we need more from Dylan, but I thought that Dean was very solid on debut 60s, and looking forward to him just getting his feet under him even more this week and helping guide the team around the park. Jack Williams and Junior Barlaw starting bookends. Joey Lussick will be the starting dummy half. Sean Lane down the left. Gideon Katonga down the right in terms of the edge back rowers. Jermaine Hopgood starts in the 13. The only rookie left standing this week is Riley Smith, and he's in the 14. Matt Dury, the milestone man, Joe Opengahi, and Dan Keir coming into this game 60s as Jason Ryles looks to get a little bit lighter and mobile on the bench. Dan Keir had a good game last week in New South Wales Cup. A lot of defense and a great backhanded flick to get Hayes Dunster over in the corner to score Parramatta's crucial final try, actually, to give them that 6-point buffer before Volkman kicks the field goal. And then in the extended roster, it's a pentuplet, whatever you want to call it, of reserve graders here in Sam Tuivasa, Charlie Geimer, Joash Papali, Ronald Volkman, and Jordan Samrani. So Ryles has tweaked the team. In the first couple of games, he was looking at more experienced players making way. This week, it's the rookies as he looks to get a bit more experience in the team and on the bench as they take on the Manly Seagulls. What do we make of it, 60s? And looking at this matchup, I suppose you look at it strategically and tactically. Where do the Eels attack Manly, and can they beat them? I suppose that's the end sum question: is can the Eels get a breakthrough win this week? And my tip is there to sort of preempt anything you say, is that Manly, I think, are maybe alongside the Cowboys as the most volatile teams in the NRL. At their absolute best, they'll put 50 on just about anyone, whether it's Melbourne or Penrith or thereabouts. They can be incredibly disruptive with the way they score long range tries, but they also have it in them to open the door for some of the lower seeded teams to smack them in the face a bit now and then.
Yeah, John, I think you've got to take the confidence out of Manly early on because they can.
They
come
love
flying
early
out of the
running.
gate.
You're right. Yep.
Yeah,
They
and
love it.
you know, much the same as the Storm like that sort of early running as well. I think if you can, you know, as I said, knock the confidence out of them. But of course, even with that said, as you pointed out, they love a long range try, and when you've got the pace that they've got in their team, it's a natural for them. They've taken advantage of defensive systems that start highly compressed down in the opponent's end of the field. So, you know, what you would traditionally see with defensive systems is if you've got a team pinned in their red zone, the defense will be highly compressed to really put the pressure on, because teams less likely to spread that ball inside their own quarter. And then as you start to progress down the field, then it opens up a little, you know, that defensive line gets wider and wider to the point where when you get to inside your red zone, you've got the wingers being probably at their widest point at any stage moving down the field. But of course, if you've got a team that can throw that unexpected, those long range tries are on. And what we started to see in the last 2 years was coaches doing that more and more. And Manly was one of the pioneers of exploiting compressed defences from long range. So you have to be on your guard against that. Absolutely. Your defensive line has to be talking, because as soon as that shift is on, you know that if they can get someone like Saab on the outside of his opposite, you're in major difficulties, because it doesn't take much for him to get past his opponent. And for a long striding winger, he actually does have quite good acceleration. And he's probably even more dangerous once you start to get up to, you know, the 40, 50 meters. You know, anyone that's trying to run him down, you're not going to run him down if he's gone past you. But to me, that's the biggest danger with Manly, is that I guess you can call it the unexpected, but it's expected from them, if that makes sense. Yeah, the defense has to be on song right from no matter where it is on the field. You know, like, I don't think you can rely on your cover defense to shut down a Manly break. They break the line, there's more chance that they're going to go the distance and score. So, so just the old mate, for a start, the hit and stick.
Oh yeah,
in the middle.
We saw that barring the first try against the Bulldogs, and that was the one that was obviously the most upsetting, where Jack Williams, and he was the initial lead defender, and then Jermaine Hopgood didn't get back in time to make the tackle. Beyond that, the Eels were great in their first up contact against the Bulldogs. And
the Bulldogs would have been hurting this week.
If they bring that same fire and attitude, barring the opening try against Canterbury this week, they'll be right there in the contest. It'll be a matter of, and I hate to rehash points that we've spoken about, but it comes down to the concept that you've proposed in the last week or two, going against the Tigers and the Bulldogs, and when you're down on your luck and the importance of scoring first. And just you talk about Manly being great front runners. It's true for Parramatta now too, where you just don't want to be chasing the scoreboard and the inherent pressure that it provides just in the back of your head, knowing that, you know, as the clock starts ticking away and you're down 6 points or you're down 10 points, you've got to find one try or two tries, and then how you're going to, you know, pierce the defense twice, and you start just getting a bit desperate and a bit frazzled. And I think that if the Eels can score first in this game, they will be in a highly competitive position to get that breakthrough win, because you're cutting off Manly at the ankles to stop them from bursting out and really putting you well behind, and they love to do that. And you're also just, you know, reinforcing your own systems, like just it's the biggest tick of validation you can have in your attacking structures, even if you like it's not a pretty try. Just the fact that you get early success, you can just go back and say, yep, you know, we got him once, we can get him again and get him again and again. Yeah,
and John, you mentioned before preamble with the NRL about where will the Eels attack the Sea Eagles. I just want to see attack.
Yeah, like it's easy to
so
say.
I don't know where they will attack the Sea Eagles. One of the things from last week is the Eels were doing such a good job defensively and winning the territorial battle against the Bulldogs. But once in prime position, the options just didn't seem to be there. I mean, they've got great attacking weapons out wide in Josh Addo-Carr and Zach Lomax. And, Zach Lomax had to come looking for involvement because he just wasn't getting enough clean ball. And we saw with the Fox that he got a try in the only real opportunity that he was given last week. I mean, forget about yardage, those sorts of things. I'm talking about where he's given that chance where he's just got a little bit of space with his opposite there, and you can start to see him use his pace. He's up against Saab, isn't he? Is he play? Would he line up?
He should be up against Saab. You're right. Yes.
Yeah. So you'd like to think then that there is maybe less chance of Saab getting on his outside, and because Josh Addo-Carr, where he was a great addition last week, was just that non-stop talking that he does out on the field to those inside him, and I mean well inside him. He's yelling out at his 5'8", the back row of the centre, letting them know where they need to be and what's happening coming over towards his side of the field. So that strong voice is something that was missing in the first couple of weeks. As I said, he's a big inclusion. But my greatest concern with this game, John, is really what's going to happen in attack, because in contrast to how it looked like we knew exactly what we were doing in that trial against the Knights, and you could see the shapes, you could see the halves engaging the line. And remember, there was no Mitch Moses in that. And yes, it was only a trial. But what you look for in a trial is not the results. You're looking for those, what the team's showing you in terms of the way they're going to play football. And not necessarily individuals either. But, you like to see some of the discipline in defence that a team's been working on. You like to see some of the shapes. And I'm not talking about big players. I'm talking about some of the base shapes that they work from. And I liked what I saw from the Eels in that first trial. I've barely seen evidence of it since then. I mean, we saw evidence of the fact that this Eels team can fight and can do better defensively, but we're yet to see too many shots that we've been able to throw at all in attack. And we saw Will Penasini score a very similar try to the shapes that we put on against Melbourne when we got some tries over in that corner. And again, that was coming around Will Penasini that week. And we know as well that if Yongi had thrown a pass to Will rather than going for the cutout pass, that the Storm wouldn't have got the intercept try, and Will probably scores. But outside of that, we're not seeing very much. And it just so happens that over the other side, we got one of the best players for the ball in the air in Zach Lomax. So much so that what we've seen from the couple of occasions where the ball has gone up, where he's been looking to compete, the opponents have systems in place to basically stop him getting that leap at the ball. They're running cover. They've got other players running cover, just getting in between, and apparently legally to stop, to get bodies around the ball to stop him getting up and competing for it. But we've barely thrown a kick up there that he can attack in terms of a try scoring opportunity. So we need to get need to get better at that. I can't believe the lack of the attacking kicking game that is not, it's just not there without Mitch Moses.
I think that's going to be a key aspect of this game, whether the Eels prevail or not, because I think that will default to bowling to Lomax a lot, but Tommy is pretty much I wouldn't say it's his equal in the air, but he's pretty good in the air. And the most success the Eels have had against Tom Trbojevic historically is when they've mixed up their kicking game and gone along the carpet in the red zone as much as they've gone to the air, and just keep him moving around, having to go down to his ankles to get the ball as much as he's going up to defuse kicks. And if Hawkins and Brown can do that, if they can provide a suitably diverse kicking game or an attacking kicking game, I think that'll be a big part of it. And obviously, going back to fundamentals, you need your forwards to really be direct at the goalposts, create the opportunities to go wide by pulling in defenders. And then you'll see guys like Lomax and Panasini, and then obviously the wingers profiting off that. But yeah, I think they're the two factors: is a diverse attacking kicking game, and not just making it obvious that we're telegraphing to Lomax, because they can, like you said, get bodies up, screen him, and get a pretty generous whistle, honestly, in terms of running him off the ball, and then being direct and fast through the middle to be able to spread the ball. Because the first 3 rounds, I think the Eels have been far too lateral before they've been aggressive and north-south. And I think that Junior took a step towards being productive in that regard last week. But you can't just have one forward doing it. You need Hopgood.
No, and
you need Joe.
have to involve the edge forwards as well.
And that's right. And
hard straight lines.
You really want to see the likes of Lane and Gideon using that unders line or angle back towards the ruck early on, because again, it's not like it's a majestic deception. Like, it's not the prestige or anything like that. But there is a reason why you hammer them, the defensive line, like that. Is because even though they know that eventually the back line shift or the option at the back's coming, you have to respect the back rower. And that's why it's important to set that platform, set that tone, and just physically, you want to impose yourself on the opposition that way. And having a back rower smashing into the opposition half, into DCE or to Brooks, and causing some fatigue early on is important. So I think
you want that defense line to be constantly moving backwards rather than and making it harder for them to get back before they come forward.
Yeah, and you want them turning their hips inside, because every fraction of a second it takes to have to realign your hips and get outside and be able to slide off and check onto the outside man makes a huge difference. And if you've been watching the opposition the last few games, we haven't been forcing them to respect the interior channels of the edges, and they can just check off, slide out, and mark up. And the few times where we did have a little bit of direct football, we scored against Canterbury, and beyond that, we didn't really threaten. So I think they're all the little check boxes you're looking for against the Seagulls as to what the Eels can do to score first and then score more. And
John, how many times did Gideon touch the ball in the first half last week?
When the ball went to the ground from the Canterbury attack, and he decided to go for the hero play, and that was it. And
that was it. He is a weapon.
He's a sledgehammer, exactly. Gideon he's obviously still pretty much a rookie, right? He's very inexperienced, and it's easy to drift out of a game in that regard as a young, inexperienced voice in the team. And when you factor in the consideration that Dean Hawkins was playing his first game, it was an incredibly chopped up right edge, because we've had multiple changes there, and you're trying to get Zach Lomax the ball too. There's a lot of factors there, but yeah, the coaching staff needs to just get into Gideon's ear and just tell him, you got to remind your half, give me the ball, let's play a bit of smash mouth football, let's get direct, let's get physical. And that's going to be a mental challenge for him, for Dean Hawkins, for the entire team in that regard. It's not just sticking to the plan, but knowing how to do minor adaptations of the plan based on what the Seagulls are doing, so you're still executing what you're planned for, but also not running into the teeth of the defense sometimes. So Gideon definitely needs more ball. I think that's the crux of it, mate. You're talking about playing direct and sucking in defenders. He's the guy with the speed, the leg speed, the physicality to be one of the prime contributors in that regard.
You saw the value of that direct running with the first half that South played against Penrith last night.
Yeah, exactly. They just that you're not going to say that the wheels are finally off for Penrith because of the players they're missing, but that was the most vulnerable I've seen Penrith in the best part of 6 years. And that was because a combination of their own issues, but also the fact that Souths just took it to them. And, you know, we always say it, rugby league is a simple game at the end of the day. You can have all your complex schematics and attacking strategies, but if a team just comes out and just runs the absolute pants off another team through the ruck, they're going to, more often than not, win and win well.
By the way, I don't know that the groundsmen are going to have to touch one end of that field there at the stadium.
It was all traffic, because Penrith had the better running in the second half, obviously, so it was all traffic in the one end. So I suppose is that a blessing or a curse for groundsmen, having one side way more chopped up than the other?
Okay, well, look, I think we're probably ready to give our tips, our predictions, John, so I'll let you fire off first.
Yeah, look, it's Manly at home against the Parramatta Eels, and we've had some success at Brookie with underdog teams in recent years, haven't we? I know Jake Arthur led the Eels to a big win back in 22, I believe. Wanga Wake scored that outrageous try where the entire part of his body was outside the field of play as he dove into the right corner. And then I think we've been having discussions with some boys, and there's a few other games. I think John Simons had a great game against Manly at Brookie, going well back, obviously. Who else was there? There's been a few games where the Eels have had the big underdog status. So
I'll throw one even further back. I remember Stanley Plunkett-Jerd.
Jeez,
having a great game at Brookvale back in the 80s. And prior to that, Phil Mann having a spectacular game against Manly back at Brookvale. And I think from memory, he instigated a try with, of all things, a chip kick. Now, if you could imagine the Phil Mann with those long legs unexpectedly chip kicking over the Manly defence line, that was a sight to behold. And mind you, those were incredible days. So the days where I would actually enjoy being on the Brookvale Hill, because the Brookvale Hill was nearly all Parramatta supporters. Yep. You know, like I think there was one week there, I'm sure it was something like 20 buses of supporters were transported down there from Parramatta Leagues Club to Brookvale that particular day. It was like this great convoy of supporters arriving and piling out at Brookvale Oval. It was that was something else. You know, I don't know how they did it, given what the crowd limitations are there now in terms of you know, how much it can accommodate. But I'm sure there were crowds there that were like 26,000, something like that. Back in those days, and you can imagine just how packed in it was on a hill with that sort of crowd. But those were the days, mate. Those were the days, and we brought back some old names there. But yes, to the predictions.
Yes. So look, Manly at home, they get their superstar fullback back into the fold. Their backline's dynamic. Their forward pack a lot more workmanlike, but obviously, Ola Kawatu is a genuine X factor there. And even their bench is probably a little bit underrated. Waddell and Bullymore have been great for him. Nathan Brown has found a second win in his NRL career after struggling in his twilight years as an Eel and then at the Roosters, and seems to be reinvigorated. So they get a bit of value off their interchange. Ooh. They also have the DCE factor, 60s, and how will the crowd welcome their talismanic halfback after he's rejected the club and said he's going to look for greener pastures elsewhere.
It will be interesting because there was a couple of fans in the Matty Johns show last night booing him when his name was mentioned. Surely, after all those years of service at Manly, they wouldn't turn.
Always a reminder that fan is derived from fanatic, mate, and fans can be. Look, fickle is not the word I'm looking for here, but because they're so parochial about the team, can turn away from you very quickly. Even someone like DCE, who's taken the premiership glory and is one of the greatest sevens in the history of their club. So, wouldn't be surprised to hear a few boos ringing out from Four Pines. But geez, it's tough to see the Eels winning this 160s. That's not to say they can't, and like we sort of laid out that blueprint about early points and preventing Manly to Manly's ability to get into tempo early. But in saying that, I felt more confident last week about a result against the Dogs, given who was out and just that home crowd factor and the bounce back factor from what we saw against the West Tigers. You felt like they were going to be up for the game. And that's not to say they're not going to be up for this game, but Canterbury and Manly are just oil and water or heads and tails, like the yin and yang. The Dogs love a gritty slugfest, and I think for our team that was a great place to be at. Manly are the flashy, like we said, volatile, mercurial Quicksilver team. So if they're on, they're going to be hard to beat, like very hard to beat, and there could be a big score. You've got to hope that they're off. So I know, it's a bit of having a bite both ways, but that's where we're at with the Parramatta Eels, is you need some factors to align for you to get this win. So I think if Manly are on, it's going to be a long day at Brookvale for us. But if they are a little bit off, just, a little bit tepid in the water, and the Eels can start fast, I think maybe the Eels win, and maybe win by a margin bigger than people might think. So let's go down that path. We'll explore that one. I'd say Parramatta to win 30 to Manly's 14 if they get that fast start.
Okay, so I'm now praying for a lot of rain. Like, I just want it to continue because I want it to be a slugfest out there. I want it to be a contest that's played a lot tighter.
It's nearly a coin toss right now based on the prediction, 40% precipitation chance. Going to be humid.
Yeah. See, John, like you, I was confident that the Eels could use the Bulldogs game as the platform to find some form, if not great form, what we saw. I just thought they could make a contest of it against the Bulldogs. And if a bit of luck or a bounce of the ball had gone their way, maybe they go close to winning it.
The Zach Lomax chip kick before the second half finds Jordan Samrani.
Yeah, Jordan Samrani dropping the ball.
Yeah.
Just getting a little bit more contact on Wilson in that when he was going for the corner. Yeah. It was... there were moments that panned out well for the Bulldogs and not so well for the Eels, but that's football. You make your own luck, especially if you're either A, at the bottom of the competition, or B, at the top. Manly is a top 4 team at their best. They genuinely are. They could genuinely challenge for the title this year. You talk about past years, the title being open. Penrith are as vulnerable now as they've ever been. And as that's even accounting for the players that are out. You look at who Penrith are fielding in their team, and now if they have 1 or 2 key players out, they're in trouble. They're not going to get massacred on the field, although it looked like it was going to be.
It looked like it was going towards 50 at half time.
Yeah. They got back on track in the second half, and I think that I think the Souths were awful in the second half last night, so that contributed to it. The worst thing that could happen for them was half time. However, we won't talk about last night's game. I think it's evident that Manly are a team that can challenge at their best for the title.
Yeah, very clearly.
So we're talking about a team that is absolutely struggling to launch any level of attack at the moment in our Eels, and a team that on their home ground in the couple of games they've played there this year have been scintillating. The head is very much saying this could be highly problematic for our team.
It sucks to frame it that way, but that's the reality, isn't it? Like,
it is.
If Manly are on, even the Eels at their best, you'd be firmly behind Manly as a contender in this contest.
Look, if Trbojevic plays, they're not far off full strength, and you just look at, as I said, you just look at the pace that's in that team, and you go, my God, they've got weapons all over the place.
Yep.
And their style of play is designed to take full advantage of the players that are there. You can possibly pull up some weaknesses. Luke Brooks, I don't think his passing game's great. He can miss a tackle. There's probably more workman-like forwards than there are strike players, although they've got a great one in Olakau'atu. But then you start to struggle to find, ways to pull them apart. Our coaches obviously do have ways that they can, identify opportunities, but whether the players can execute what the coaches are after, and even then whether our coaches this week are going to overly complicate it, or they just want it to be, nice and simple with what they want the team to deliver. That's why I'm hoping for rain. Like I genuinely am, John, because as I said, the brain is thinking this could be ugly. The heart is going, no, look, the boys can do it. They turned up last week. So in a sitting on the fence moment where I don't let the head dictate.
Drown out the heart.
Drown out the heart. I'm going to tip purely from the heart, and only from the heart, because after all, when it comes to supporting a team, you have to do that. I certainly wouldn't make any betting tips of an Eels win, but I will, with my heart, say if the conditions prevail the way it looks like they are going to, if they can keep it tight, if the communication is good with the defence, if they can put Manly off their game early and get that first try, then the Eels can make a contest of it. And I'm opposite to you. I think if the Eels win, it's a really low-scoring, tight game rather than a high-scoring game. Now, that goes against everything I've been saying the first few weeks. What I saw last week was a relatively low-scoring, tight contest, and I think that's where the Eels have to start building from. I think they have to work towards really limiting what the opponents are going to do, and I don't think we've got because I don't think our attack has got the cohesion to score a lot of points at the moment. There might be the potential to score some, but right now the cohesion isn't there. So I'll go with the Eels winning this one, the score of 16-12.
Yeah, so I tipped the big win, obviously, which I just think historically when the Eels get their noses ahead in these kind of games, even if they're under strength, which there is no doubt the Eels are right now, that, yeah, I just feel like they can go on and put a few points on. So that's at least my strategy there.
Well, this will be interesting because we've got contrasting opinions on how we think this might, for an Eels win, how it would play out. I think we both have similar fears of how it might play out. But who will be your prediction to be the first try scorer for Parramatta? Remember, this is not the first match try scorer, but the first try scorer for Parramatta, and also our best on field this week. Well, I think I got last week right, didn't I, in terms of the best on field? It was the prediction for Zach Lomax.
Yeah, Zach Lomax was a very solid pick there. And listening to him post-game and just, obviously the interaction we were able to share. But in terms of the football aspect, I'm sort of expecting Zach to back up with another big effort here. He's really hungry to get the Eels on the board. First try scorer, Lomax is a great shout here just because the Eels go to him. But my first try scorer, if the Eels are to win and win well, we spoke about getting this player involved and that, sledgehammer approach. So Gideon Katonga down the right edge, him and Dean Hawkins maybe have something cooking for first try scorer. And again, that's predicated on the idea that the Eels are to win and win well. They need to start fast and they need to open up other attacking channels by doing exactly this. So Gideon having early success would be huge. So I'll tip him for first try scorer.
John, I'm going to make the wildest possible tip that might not have been wild in previous years, but is now Dylan Brown.
Yeah, it is funny how that is actually a pretty hot tip right now. And then best on field, again, Zach Lomax will be right up there. So in the spirit of not picking the guy that's going to run for 250 metres and, give you everything. Geez, where do we go here?
I'll go Dylan Brown again.
You're going to double down Dylan Brown? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Well, then I will go. Look, we saw signs of life from him last week. And again, in the similar spirit of if Ginn is going to be first try scorer to help pave the way for the Parramatta Eels win this game, if the Eels are to play some smash mouth football and really bloody Manly's nose early on, they're going to need their starting forwards to kick ass and take names, and that means that their captain Junior Barlaw has to build on what we saw last week and really become just a physical tour de force for the ruck. And if he can do that and he can be best on field, then I think there's every reason to think that the Eels can bloody Manly up and steal a win.
Well, John, as we get to the end of this podcast, I reflect on our decision to go with a separate preview podcast for the junior reps because I'm looking at the time that we've taken.
I mean, there was the big Dylan Walker and Fleur Ginn news and the Parramatta stuff, so that tacked on comfortably 20-plus minutes. So, look, realistically, it was an hour run time for the 3 games, which is what we're comfortable with.
Yes.
But, yes, not every week is going to have that's not true. Every week we'll have the news podcast subverted or missing out on key news. It's just part of the tradition now. But it's not always going to require the preview podcast to cover it, and it can wait to a news podcast in some other weeks.
Yes, of course. But as we get to the end of this podcast, we thank our listeners, our viewers for tuning in, and also to our sponsors, Parramatta Leagues Club, the home of the Eels, and also Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. Just want to give a little reminder as well about the 50-50 raffle. It's a great way to support the Eels Foundation, which will be doing great work, not just for future Eels players and the Centre of Excellence, but also the community in general via the community centre there at the Centre of Excellence and all the great programs that the club will be running, which impact things like well-being, mental health, that sort of thing. So, get behind the 50-50 raffle. You don't have to be at the game to win the raffle. And as I said, it's a great charity to support. So, John, thank you. And as I always say, go you mighty Eels.